many people, it is kind of hard to understand men in prison doing quilting. No, that is a no-no. But when you're doing it for a meaningful cause, for a purpose of being able to provide the services for the men that are dying, why not? It is a humanitarian cause. My 17 years of being a hospice volunteer, I never knew that life was so important that here you're talking to someone today and they're gone tomorrow. And we're talking about some men that I've known and men that I figuratively grew up with in prison. It helped me to appreciate life, knowing that what I was doing, I was providing for the men that was terminally ill, men that at any given day will pass, men that I would never see again in life.
Welcome to Meet the Leader. I'm Kateryna Gordiychuk, and I'm introducing you to Gary Tyler, who's a fiber artist for social justice. Hi, Gary.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. You have such a remarkable story, and we're so lucky to have you here in the studio with us. How do you even start describing your life journey and what got you here?
You know, I've been asked that question many times, and I've answered it in many different ways because it's not one way that you can answer, especially when it's so traumatic. But what I do in turn is that I just try to get people to understand that despite my ordeal, I was able to overcome it. And through art, that was one of the things that I was able to mirror my experience to give people, you could say, an understanding of what I went through. And this basically was born out of me being able to take care of terminally ill men in prison. It all started off by making quilts for the patient. And when the patient passed, we passed it on to their family, as sentimental values, because this is something that kept their loved one warm. And as time went on, it was a thing about what could we do to raise funds for the program, to be able to, purchase the necessary things that men in prison is not necessarily afforded. So we started doing that, making quilts to sell and to buy things, and also the funds that we raised from quilting, it enabled the program to finance the trips and the flights, as well as paying for hotel expenses for family members that was out of state. And it became rewarding. So that itself was kind of like catapulted me into art.
You were 17 when you were sentenced to death and commuted to life. At what point during your 40 years in prison did you turn to art?
Well, it's ironic that when I was first brought to death row, one of the guys that was on the tier, he was in his cell, and he was putting, you could say, jewelry boxes, picture frames together with matchsticks. And I noticed that. And to me, it was kind of like, wow, this is what this guy do, for his pastime. But it became an art for him. This is something that he was making for his loved ones when they visit. More so when he was getting cigarette tobaccos, packaged and making picture frames and jewelry boxes. That drew my interest, and I wanted to get it. I wanted to notice, because also it was a thing about you being in a 6x9 cell. What it is that you're gonna do? Read books, concentrate, you understand, and grieve in your demise. No, I wanted something to keep me preoccupied, and that was something that I did, even though it didn't cure, you understand, the situation as a whole, but it gave me something to focus on. And later on, that itself helped me to transition into doing art, mainly the quilts for hospice.
Why quilting? Why is this is that specific artwork that you chose?
Well, let me tell you, it wasn't easy, all right? It was something that I was literally, I would say, coerced by friends, that they needed help. And I kind of like shunned away from it because quilting to me in the men's prison was something feminine. And I didn't want to be associated with that. But by knowing that I was a hospice volunteer and these guys needed help, I kind of like relented and started helping them. And next thing you know, I was sold on it. And I started doing quilting, you understand, and it became a passion of mine.
What do you think convinced you about it? Because that is such a dramatic change, right, for you?
Well, you know what's so amazing about quilting is that it's the finished product. That you get material and you match it and you put it together and it draws pictures, all kind of pictures, depending on what vision and frame of mind that you want your quilt to come out. And by me being a graphic art graduate, I utilize applique into quilting. And you know, in which case, you know, I didn't know that it was gonna apply, but when it did work, that kind of like, I mean, it sent me out there that I wanted to do more. I wanted to do the impossible while being a quilter. You understand? And then it was in my DNA because my grandmother, she was a quilter. And my mother, she was a seamstress. My mother made clothing for her and my sisters. You understand? Out of the old J.C. Penney's and Sears catalog where they had these patterns. And she used to make that, but you know, as a kid, you don't pay much attention to that. But as I reflect back on my grandmother sitting at the sewing machine, it was one of those old-fashioned Sears sewing machine that you paddle. You understand? And keep it going. So it, you know, I had this kind of like flashback, and I realized this is in your DNA. This is part of your family history. So I really began to embrace it, knowing that it's a tradition that need to be carried on by generations. But of course, why me as a man? You know, many people, it's kind of hard to understand men in prison doing quilting. No, that is a no-no. But when you're doing it for a meaningful cause, for a purpose of being able to provide the services for the men that are dying, men that you know that could subject of leaving anytime, why not? It is a humanitarian cause.
It might be a bit sentimental of me, Gary, but it makes me feel as though that quilting connected you back to your family, right?
Yes,
while you were in prison.
It did, most definitely. It helped me, it helped me to appreciate life, knowing that what I was doing, I was providing for the men that was terminally ill, men that at any given day will pass, men that I would never see again in life. And we're talking about some men that I've known and men that I figuratively grew up with in prison. So yes, it's something that I find myself embracing and feel that you can tell stories. You can be able to relate to the world and let people know that, art is beautiful, especially when you're doing quilting.
Gary, do you remember one of the first maybe pieces that you felt really proud of that you made?
Well, it was the first piece, having to be able to have the liberty of doing something that you wanted to do. You saw the guys that working around you doing their individualized pieces and having to sit there and contemplate what it is that you wanted to do, and sitting there and meticulously cutting the pieces out and matching the colors and putting it together. Oh yes, the first one was, to me it was my best piece. But even though it was the beginning, but it also gave me an appreciation of knowing that this is something that that can be rewarding, and yes, it was my first piece. Yep, and it was made of windmills and hearts.
You said that you started quilting originally because your friends convinced you to.
Yeah.
And it was to help them, and you felt like it really helped their trauma and it helped to save their life.
Mhm.
So that was already for you such a big tool for social justice then.
Yes. We're talking about men, and what's so depressing about it is that my 17 years of being a hospice volunteer, I never knew that life was so important, that here you're talking to someone today and they're gone tomorrow. And through the process, you get to know the individual family and how much they love their loved one. And then having to be there when the individual expires, and knowing that where's the mercy, where's the forgiveness in the criminal justice system, where this individual could have been, you could say, medically paroled to his family, where he'd been able to spend his time, at least his remaining days, with his loved ones, or giving an individual a second chance. And that's something that the criminal justice system failed. If you're saying that you're about justice, then you should have mercy for those that are not able to fend for themselves or speak for themselves.
Gary, as I was thinking about your quilts, a lot of them have been made when you were incarcerated, but now they're displayed all over the world. How does it make you feel to see them all around? And how do your quilts affect people?
Well, that wasn't my intended purpose from the beginning. As time went on and being encouraged by others saying, man, that people love your artwork and you good at this. It kind of like gave me a pat on the back that I was doing something that was quite meaningful. I never knew that many years later that the quilts that I was instrumental in making, that these quilts would find their way in museums. I never knew that, one of the quilts that we made that would be in an African American museum. But when it was told to me, I felt it was a great accomplishment because, it exemplifies the heart and soul of those of us that was, incarcerated. So it gave me a sense of pride knowing that I was on the right path, that I was giving back, and that I was helping to expose the injustices and unfairness of the criminal justice system.
You've had such a difficult life, and yet you speak with such inspiration, and you don't seem angry about what happened to you. How has art helped you in this process?
Well, many people say, why are you not bitter? How did you survive this? You never know what you're capable of doing, well, unless you're in a situation where you're being forced to make decisions on a daily basis. Do you want to live, or do you want to become a victim of the turmoil and violence of the prison life? And I went through my transition. I was bitter. I was, became resentful. I became very, disappointed in what had happened to me. If I was young, I was going through my, you could say, this transition as a young man. But as time passed, I realized that there had to be some self-reckoning, because if I want to move forward, then I'm having to first start forgiving myself by allowing myself to capitulate and falling, mentally victim to the system itself. And then reach outward of forgiving the ones who was forced to testify against me in court. So once I went through that transition and I realized that fork in the road and by the suffering that I went through, it gave me the ability to make the right decision in my life.
What kind of lessons would you have for people who have not had your experience? How do you persevere? How do you stay strong? And as you said, make these decisions when you're forced to make them every single day.
Well, I would like to emphasize to our community whether it's local, national, or international, that the people that we know, that we meet, that we went to school with, no one is perfect. And if someone, find themselves on the other side, you could say, of the law, doesn't necessarily make them a bad person. We should always remember those individuals that's in prison are members of our community. They are family members of people that we know, if not our own family members. And we should never forsake them. We should never, you could say, turn deaf ear on those who reaching out for help. Let's try to help to rehabilitate and make this individual whole, where this person could be, where they can contribute back to our community. But if we isolate them and ignore them and try to make it as though they no longer exist, it works against society when that happens, because that individual one day may be released from prison, but you would want that person to be released who's willing to give back to the community, who recognized the wrong, the things that he had did in his community, and we understand and work to try to make things right, not sit back and spite the individual, where when a person is finally released, he feel vindictive, he feel hateful about society. No, I feel that society have failed our community, and the failure of our community breeds such, such criminality and disappointment, where people are forced to do the things that they're doing. So society must take accountability, especially the criminal justice system, because you can't make one hat fit all, because one hat doesn't fit all. Everybody change, and everybody should be given a second chance at life.
So taking responsibility as citizens in our societies.
Taking responsibility.
What is a piece of advice that you've been grateful for that has helped you through these years?
Never give up. Persevere despite the challenges. And remember, just because you're in prison doesn't mean that it diminishes the possibilities that you can make a difference in your community. And they always say that service to humanity is the best work of life. And Earth's greatest treasure lies in human personality.
Thank you so much, Gary.
Thank you.
That was Gary Tyler, fiber artist for social justice. For more episodes of Meet the Leader, go to the World Economic Forum's YouTube page or wef.ch/podcasts.